All right, so given that, Derrell, so that could be an argument against teacher tenure. That could be an argument that says, all right, this was about 1909. This was about us not having the kinds of civil rights protections that we now have against identity. You now can't fire someone for those purposes. And so let's kind of shed teacher tenure because it is redundant, right? But that isn't typically the way that I hear the argument framed by Campbell Brown and Students First and others. I hear it framed as tenure provides lifetime employment for bad teachers. And honestly, as I look at the statutes, I don't see, for the most part, that is what tenure does.
So it's obviously much more nuanced, and I will agree with you. I, too, grew up in the 70s and 80s. Yeah. So there's a difference between the idea of the intellectual and professional protections in tenure and how they actually manifest themselves in the world. And I think you really hit on the most important thing, which is that the due process protections in tenure are kind of like the protections that most public employees have already, but on steroids. It's like the difference between the safety patrol and the military. So in New York State, it costs $300,000 and takes 830 days to remove a teacher who is demonstrated as ineffective on a student achievement. There are other dismissal statutes to take more time or less, but the fact that it takes 3 years and $300,000, I would argue, is both bad for the teacher and terrible for the student.
So help me understand where that number comes from.
Sure. So it's the process is so arcane. It has so many steps, so many legal interactions, takes so much will and effort to do. And again, it's like so financially burdensome that no one does it. So tenure itself, and I would think, Campbell and most of the people who are suing on these things, we're not necessarily saying that teachers shouldn't have tenure.
To the extent there is a classroom teacher here, it is me. I am a teacher, right? Sure. I teach in the classroom, all year. And I have tenure of the sort that people normally think tenure means, which is at the university level. Unless I do something really horrifying, I mostly get to keep my job, as do the vast majority of my colleagues. And in fact, everybody wants to send their children to schools that I teach at, because it is a place where the best people go to teach, because we don't have that sense of at any moment we will be fine. Like, I guess part of what I find surprising is the presumption that K through 12 would be so different, that you would attract the best teachers by removing job security rather than by providing it.
So exactly. I want to make this point again. There is job protection. There is due process that exists for all New York State public employees already. Tenure is in addition to that. So that's the first thing.
But
the second thing is that at the it's okay. It's that you won't be the first person or the last person to do it. It's at the university level, right? You're dealing with a system where no one forces you to go to college. No one forces you to pick a college, right? I happen to be a fan of college.
Yes. Well, it's the one part of our system that most people agree works, right? I mean, like on a global level, people come here to go to college.
Right. So, but in the K-12 system, like you get assigned to a school based on where you live, and you have no control over the teacher that you get. So those things are fundamentally different. The last, and I think the most important thing about this, like big business, whatever, the lead plaintiff in the New York case, Mr. Wright, let me tell you what this is about for him. His twin daughters, who go to the same school and who have different teachers, and one is knocking it out of the park, and there's a real educational disparity in this man's home because of his other daughter.
Derrell, this feels to me like you talked about pushing back on the other side, and this piece is the piece that feels to me like it keeps being missing, is that public schools are not inherently problematic because they're public schools when they're well-resourced, I used to send my kids to a public school in Princeton, New Jersey. Guess what? It's a very high-performing school.
I know that town.
Right, because it's got, and guess what the teachers have? Tenure. You know what they do? They stay a really long time. And so it's hard for me to believe that this thing is the thing causing the inequality matters, but I don't understand the causal link.
So there's no one thing that is specifically responsible, and there's no one thing that specifically needs to be changed, and I've never argue that, and no right-thinking person ever does. So, you could look at a place like Newark where they spend $24,000 a kid, right? Like it's in some places it's resources, in some places it isn't. You can find very high-performing schools with low-income kids in them that are like traditionally public. It's possible to do it. The challenge is that the way, and the Obama administration actually released, or the OSR, the Office of Civil Rights, released a report about this recently. The problem is that systemically and systematically, the current system makes sure that the least experienced teachers go precisely to the place where we need the most experienced teachers. It makes sure that the schools are segregated based on residency, which means they're definitely segregated based on race and then based on income. It's all of the accelerants to the achievement gap are actually hardwired into the system. It's operating precisely the way it's supposed to.
So Dana, do we have models from our own history that work better?
Yeah, we did see achievement gaps close during the years when we were more aggressively integrating our schools, and we stopped doing that because busing was so controversial. There are other models.
God, say that 4 more times, that when we integrated our schools aggressively, we had better outcomes.
Yes,
in the 60s and the 70s.
Those were the years when the achievement gap closed most aggressively.
And I happen to be a Democrat, and I think it's...
Although it would be totally fine if you weren't.
I know. Thank you. Welcome me in. Look, I just want to say it's important that people understand that, no political party is a block, right? There is, wide range of opinion in every, political universe. That's just the first thing. But the second thing is that it's look, people are taking on tenure and LIFO, which are last in, first out protections, and talking about assessments and these things because, in the absence of talking about them, in the absence of sort of raising them in the public consciousness, nothing happens. Nothing happens, right? So you can be upset about the language that gets used, and maybe it's definitely a little impolitic in the case of Katrina, but at least now, the issues are on the table. If no one's on the other side pushing back hard on the fact that a kid in New York can go to school today, fund a huge chunk of the system, and graduate with a diploma that he or she can't read, if you don't think that's a huge social issue that we need to take on, then we need to have a totally different conversation.
All right, so Derrell, so I love that, and Amy, I'm going to let you in on this as soon as we come back from the break, because this question of, is there someone on the other side pushing back hard, is exactly the question I want to ask you, and going right back to the issue of public. Is there somebody pushing for the notion of a public system that is pushing back hard, or we got to consensus about other issues when we come back?